So for the online portion, I didn't really know what to expect. I kind of just went in thinking that everyone would bring like aggressive decks, and I brought anti-aggressive decks, and it ended up working out. I remember the last series, I didn't really expect to get through the second phase of groups because, I don't know, my lineup didn't really cater too well to what I was against. And I remember the only reason I made it through is because I like top decked lethal against Jav in the very last series, and it like worked really beautifully because I didn't have to go through the last chance qualifier. But it worked out, you know. I don't think I had any remarkable games in the qualifiers. It was very like standard. I brought kind of decks that I'm really used to, and I just felt comfortable playing the entire way through. So there weren't any games that really stood out to me. It was just another game. So I did look at the groups. It's kind of hard to like speak to the strength of groups, just because players that aren't as like, I guess, developed in the tournament scene aren't that much like worse at all than people who are like super developed. So plus you don't really know what they're going to bring a lot, and like I have no idea what the Chinese players are going to bring, so I can't really prepare against them very well. So it makes it kind of hard, and I really can't tell which group is harder. I want to say my group's harder because I'm in it, so you know, if I lose I have an excuse. But yeah, it's too hard to tell for me. If I could choose a group to be in, I would probably pick the other group. Probably, but not a lot. Well, the previous time I didn't have very good results. I got through the qualifiers really easily, made it to the main event, and then lost in groups. But this time around, and I practiced a decent amount for that one. This time around, I practiced like none because I was on vacation the past week and a half, and I didn't really have good enough internet to practice. It kept cutting out and stuff, so I kind of just didn't practice very much. I'm hoping that doesn't reflect on how I do, but we'll see. Hopefully I just draw well. When preparing for tournaments, I always look up like who I'm against, and it depends like how the tournament is formatted. Like if I just need to get past groups, and then you know I have like a 75% chance of playing a player who just brings all aggro, then I'll bring like an anti-aggro lineup. But if it's like, you know, 50-50, you know, some mid-range, some aggro, maybe even some control, I'll generally tend to go with decks that can just do well against everything. It's like Druid and Rogue. I play Rogue a lot, and it can pretty much beat everything. It's very like middle of the line. It just depends what I think people will be bringing in the group. I've been to China 2 times. I spent a month there with Tempo Storm before I was on Liquid. But they usually just rank Zoo really, really highly. So I'm expecting them to bring like Zoo and Secret Paladin. They usually bring like, I don't want to say brain dead decks, but I don't know. Not to say they're bad players, but they usually just bring decks that perform well on ladder. And those decks aren't necessarily that good in tournaments. Ladder decks tend to be quicker just because you can get more games in and rank up faster, but yeah, it's not the same with tournament decks. Tournament decks can be tailored a little better, and I'm not sure if they tailor them that correctly. I think it's possible, especially with like travel fatigue and things like that, but it hasn't gotten to that point for me. I know Colento had to decline a few tournaments just because he traveled too much, and that makes sense. Traveling is like really, really exhausting. You have to like get over jet lag. You know, one tournament you might have to be in Europe, the next United States or China or something. So traveling does take a toll on you, but I don't really think there's too much tournament fatigue when it comes to online tournaments, just lands. Every time I get invited to a tournament, I try to compete in it. So pretty often, like as much as possible. I don't play in qualifiers anymore because I don't really have the time, because I'm trying to stream more and do that. But yeah, I try to compete in every tournament, and my results are usually pretty decent. I never really get to the very top, but I always do like in the middle and enough to, you know, have like a 60 or 70% win rate, which is like decent in the tournament scene. So Colento, he is probably Him and Stansifka are probably the people I'm most worried about. They're the most unpredictable when it comes to tournaments. Sometimes they'll bring 3 like aggro decks with like Shaman and Zoo and all that. Or, I don't know, Stansifka brings like the weirdest control decks. Last time he brought like double BGH, double Brawl Warrior with like no late game, and it didn't even beat aggro. It was so strange. So I don't really know what to put them on. I usually just try to pick good enough decks to where a consistent deck will beat them. But they're probably the ones I'm more concerned about because I don't feel as comfortable playing against their decks most of the time, especially Stansifka. He brings the weirdest things. Surrender, I know he's a very good player. Apparently he had like the most BlizzCon points, so I'm kind of scared of him. But we'll see. I don't really know what decks he plays. I don't know what the Korean meta is like. Korean, yes. Cypher, he usually just brings solid decks, so hopefully my solid decks line up well against his solid decks and things work out. The 2 Chinese players, I have absolutely no idea who they are. I just put them on having Zoo, so that's, I don't know. It's hard to research them. Every time you look up something, it's all in Chinese. Yeah, I think it's kind of strange to do groups with 8 players and then break it down into 6 players. I guess it's fine. It's just another format. It's basically like groups into double elimination. Not even double elimination. It's not double elimination. I wish it was double elimination in the bracket phase. But yeah, it's kind of weird to do groups and then have only one person not advance out of groups. Usually it's just GSL style groups and 2 people advance. I definitely have the possibility to win the entire tournament. I'm not sure if it'll happen, but it's definitely possible. 3-0, easy. I have not visited anything in Minsk. It is ridiculously cold outside. It looks like a blizzard. I don't see snow that often, and whenever I look outside, I'm just amazed by how much there is and that people are actually outside. Yeah, it's crazy.